Okay, if you look at the back side of your 4-4 notes, on the bottom, there's a proof there that we really have not done before. I mean, we've done proofs before, we've done flowchart proofs before, but we have never tried to prove that a point is a midpoint. Okay? We've never gone that route. Not that this is terribly different than anything else we've done, but we need to make sure that we understand the process of proving that something is a midpoint, or maybe proving that something is an angle bisector, or proving things like that, proving some of those other vocab words we talked about a while ago. Okay? So, starting out here, what I want to do first is I want to start with what we are trying to prove. So off to the side, I'm just going to kind of write a plan for my proof. Okay? So off to the side, I'm going to say, well, if we were trying to prove that H is the midpoint of line segment LM, well, right there is point H, and LM is that long segment, obviously, from L to M. So let's just take a moment and think, well, okay, if H was, in fact, the midpoint, what would happen? What would we know if it was the midpoint? Right. Line segment LH would be congruent to line segment HM. Okay? So I'm kind of going off to the side here and saying, all right, well, if H is the midpoint of LM, then LH would be congruent to HM, line segment HM. Good, all right. Well, let's think about that. Is there now any way for us to prove that line segment LH is congruent to line segment HM? Would there be any way for us to do that? Now please notice what I have in blue is just speculation. We don't know that. We can't use that as a proof. Yes, ma'am? Let's go ahead and see if we can say the triangles are congruent. All right. So in order to know that, LH and HM, those look to me like they might be corresponding parts of our two triangles, right? So let's say we know that if triangle, I don't know, let's call that LKH. If triangle LKH is congruent to triangle MNH, then yeah, we know that those line segments are congruent, right? Because they're corresponding parts of congruent triangles. Great. Okay, now wait a minute. Are we able to show the triangles are congruent?
No. Yeah, we are.
Okay, you're saying yes. Some people are saying no. If you're saying yes, why? What are we able to show, Wiley?
We can show that angle LKH is congruent to angle MNH.
Careful. Careful, careful. LKH, you're saying this angle. And MNH, you're saying this angle. Is there any way to show that those two angles are congruent? No, not enough information. It would be nice if we knew parallel lines, because then we could, right? Because they'd be alternate interior angles. But we don't have parallel lines, and so we can't say that those angles are congruent. Can anybody tell me which ones we can? I thought you had your hand up. Yes?
Angle MHN is congruent to LH.
MHN is congruent to LHK. How do we know that? Because they are vertical angles. The vertical angles theorem says that they're going to be congruent. Cool. And so then we're able to say, and I'm just going to go ahead and put that over here, we can show that angle LHK is congruent to angle, what do you say, MHN? Okay, we know that because they're vertical angles, so therefore how do we show our triangles are congruent? Angle, angle, side. Angle, angle, side shows the triangles are congruent. Okay, so we kind of have a plan in place here, right? We kind of walked through what all the pieces we're going to need in order to show that H is the midpoint of line segment LM. So let's then back out and write this proof. Okay, so writing the proof, we have to start with what we're given. We're given line segment KH is congruent to line segment NH, and angle L is congruent to angle M. Those are two pieces we definitely need to show our triangles are congruent. So I'm going to start there. Zoom in on this just a little bit more so you guys can read that easier. So we have line segment KH is congruent to line segment NH because it's given. We know that angle L is congruent to angle M. Because it's given. And now the missing piece we didn't have was that angle LHK is congruent to angle MHN. But remind me again, how did we know those were congruent? Our vertical angles theorem. Okay, so those three pieces of information, which are marked on the diagram in red, allow us to say that triangle LKH is congruent to triangle MNH. And again, we have discussed this already because of angle side. Don't forget when you're writing flow proofs to put in arrows. You've got to tell me what is giving me what. Those three pieces of information come together to tell me the triangles are congruent. All right, so now that we had the triangles were congruent, we needed to know that those line segments, LH is congruent to HM, right? Again, do we now have enough information in our proof to say that?
Yeah.
Yes. So we know that LH is congruent to line segment HM by what? Say it again, please. CPCTC. And remind me, what does that stand for? Correct. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Good. And so now that we have that, like we said, we're now able to say that H is the midpoint of line segment LM. So H is the midpoint of line segment LM. And that is because of what? What do you suppose? Yeah, because that's what a midpoint does, right? So that is the definition of midpoint.